Why we are all living in a little bit of an alternate reality, plus Trump in rally mode, Bloomberg is in trouble, and a video that's going to tug at your heart. All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. We all live in a reality now that is not reality. Wait, that didn't quite make sense. You're going to understand what I'm talking about in a second. First of all, watch this video of Chuck Todd, and then I'll explain.
I want to bring up something that Jonathan last put in the Bulwark today, and it was about how, in Ruth, we've all been on the receiving end of the Bernie online brigade. And here's what he says. He says, no other candidate has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade. I mean, except for Donald Trump. The question no one is asking is this: what if you can't win the presidency without an online mob? What if we now live in a world where having a bullying agro-social media army running around, popping anyone who sticks their head up is either an important ingredient for or a critical marker of success?
Wow. Okay, that's
I know everybody's freaking out about this, but you saw the MAGA rally that's preparing around here. There are people coming from 3 or 4 states on that. That's real, and you know, this is like Bernie.
That is a really depressing sentence that you just read.
The Digital Brown Shirt Brigade, the online army. Let me show you something that's going to help you out greatly in the future. This is the most practical thing in the history of mankind. You need practice on it. I need practice on it. And everybody in society needs to do a lot more of this. You ready for this? You see what I'm doing here? I'm holding up a phone. I'm setting down a phone. You see, I'm holding up a phone. I'm setting down a phone. We live in an alternate reality because we have allowed ourselves to exist in an alternate reality, and it is skewing our society, dividing our society, and people need to make adjustments on how they live their lives. Everybody does. See, this is not about Chuck Todd. It's not about saying something stupid like Brown Shirt Brigade. It's not about that. This is about all of us. This is about how the field of journalism has been destroyed, not only by its own crazy leftist thoughts, but by social media. This is about how Hollywood has been destroyed by social media, corporations by social media, and you and I, the individual, have allowed social media to negatively affect our lives, and this is what I mean. I don't consider social media to be a bad thing. You all do something different, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but basically everybody's on it on some level now. But it is a fire hose of information. And because it is a fire hose of information and you want to take a drink from it, you had better be really careful on how you do it. And nobody seems to have figured this out yet. Do you want to know why a company like Gillette, who is clearly catering to men, I mean, they have women's products, but that is a man's company. You're Gillette. Do you want to know how they could run an ad campaign? I'm not going to show it for you. We've showed it before. A long ad about, a father teaching his transgender son how to shave, which cost them, they estimate, over $2 billion. How could a company make a mistake that big? Because they exist on social media. And well, you have to understand, everybody's talking about this, and this company's doing it, and this company's doing it, and this guy said something against them, and we got 8,000 emails, and the phones are ringing. That doesn't mean it's a reality. Politicians do this too. Look, the President of the United States does this. And I told you yesterday, and I really believe this, I think it's fun and it's funny that we now do, politics, we do diplomacy online. We have CIA directors arguing with U.S. senators right there online for all to see. It's fun, it's exciting, it's lots of information. But should they be setting policy on that? You see Democrats are gone crazy recently because of impeachment, right? And you take a step back and you look at the poll numbers and you see Donald Trump's clear up here and you think, how could they be that stupid? How could they be that? Because they exist online. Their staffers exist online. They're on Twitter all day long. This is what people are saying. We have to impeach him. If we don't impeach him, we have to get it to companies, corporations. They get all these complaints in because you are, with a click of a button, you can gain support and gain support and gain support and drown somebody's email inbox or their Twitter feed and make somebody think that a reality exists that doesn't exist. How often have you gotten online, whether, again, be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever other fancy stuff the kids are using these days, and watched people get in these online fights with people? Who takes the time to do that? Who gets online and argues with people? And then you'll hear people screaming about how offended they are, and you can't say that to me, and that's not... People, set it down. Just set it down. I have a big online presence, of course, because I'm so famous and awesome. When I don't want to be involved anymore, when I'm with the wife and kids, I set it down. That's all it takes. And so journalists, they talk about this online brown shirt brigade, and this is how scary life has become. And can you believe? People, they only have access to you because you let them have access to you. Yes, in the social media age, the good news about it, the good thing about it is everybody has a voice. The bad thing about it is everybody has a voice. Just because every loser in the world has the ability to now say something to you as a politician, someone in a big corporation, as a journalist, as an individual, doesn't mean you have to listen to it. Turn it off. Set it down. But now it's become so big, it's become so all-consuming, and politicians from the president on down have embraced it so much that it is becoming reality to them. And it's totally skewing what's real in life. We all need to do better. Figure out a way to safely drink from the fire hose without it blasting your face off. And if you can't do that, set it down all the way and go get your water somewhere else. Here endeth the lesson. Donald Trump was in rally mode last night. Here it was.
Lindsay, Trump supporters are as fired up as I have ever seen them. I mean, this rally is in an arena that I was at just 2 nights ago, Saturday night, at an event that included all of the major Democratic candidates for the Democratic nomination. And we have a bigger crowd here by far just for Donald Trump than we had on Saturday for all of the Democrats.
That's a big deal. And you know what? I'm ashamed to admit this, but at once upon a time, I actually said something that was incorrect. Back during the primary, the GOP primary of 2016, when I opposed Trump, I was a big Ted Cruz guy. And I used to laugh at all the hardcore Trump fans and be like, oh, we have all the yard signs. Your guy doesn't have any. I'd be like, oh, you people are so dumb. That doesn't matter. And Trump was doing these big rallies back then, long before he was president, and he was packing stadiums, and there were lines out front. And my guy, Ted Cruz, would have like 500 people. And I'd be like, you guys are so stupid. Why would that even matter? People, it matters. Excitement matters. We just had the Iowa caucuses for the Democrat Party, and the turnout was in the gutter. Ladies and gentlemen, think about how angry Democrats are at this time. And I don't blame them. If the shoe was on the other foot, I'd be angry too. Think how much they should be motivated. Yet not a single candidate in this field can get them excited to turn out for an election. Their first major election, this is their first chance, albeit, small, to try to stick it to Trump and show them how mad they are. And everybody just stayed home. In the meantime, Trump, coming off his biggest week of his presidency, is packing stadiums. Excitement matters, ladies and gentlemen, because excitement is contagious. And Trump, he breeds excitement. Every time he goes someplace, people get more and more fired up. They tell their friends about it. They tell their neighbors about it. The guy's a political phenom, whether you like him or not. All right, Trump took the time to take a shot at Nancy Pelosi.
And I had somebody behind me who was mumbling terribly, mumbling, wah, wah, ho, ha. He was mumbling. Very distracting. Very distracting. No, it's very distracting. I'm speaking and a woman is mumbling terribly behind me, angry. There was a little anger back there. We're the ones should be angry, not them. We're the ones that should be angry.
The dude is something out there on the campaign trail. And you know what I enjoy? Like, you heard the crowd start chanting "lock her up" like they used to do about Hillary. And you remember the media always freaks out about that. How could they say that? They want a dictator. How could they? Nobody understands that the crowd at these Trump events, they understand that it's a show too. They understand this is all just a show. You've heard me talk about it a million times when he points at the media and criticizes them, and the crowd starts booing and hissing at him, and the media freaks out. Oh, there's going to be violence. And there's never been violence. Nobody's ever touched him. The crowd gets it. It's a show. It's an enjoyable show. And Donald Trump, he's been doing it his whole life. The man understands how to entertain. Mitt Romney, probably not winning any personality awards at the Donald Trump events.
And in the Senate, other than Romney, we had... we had 2 Democrats. 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 We had We got 52 to nothing. 52 to nothing. That's something. And in one case, we got 53 to nothing, but I don't even count that, to be honest with you. The radical left's pathetic partisan crusade has completely failed and utterly backfired with 18 votes. Think of that, 18 votes to spare, with a lot of votes to spare. And also, very importantly, as of today, we, because it's we, it's not I, it's we, it's all, we're all in this together. We have the highest poll numbers that we have ever had. Thank you, Nancy, very much. Thank you.
He's never going to stop trolling them about that impeachment thing. And you know what? I can't blame them. Trump says people are excited for us and not excited for them. And gosh, is he right?
You know, they always talk about the Democrats. They have enthusiasm, right? We have so much more enthusiasm than it's not even close. They're all fighting each other. They're all going after each other. You got them all over the place. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. They can't even count their votes.
Oh, they earned every bit of that. All right, we have a good show for you tonight. You're going to want to stick around and hear what Mike Bloomberg had to say. He found himself in a little bit of trouble, but we got good guests. We got a E-block that's going to melt your heart. All that's coming up soon. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. Joining me now is Mr. Ken LaCourte of LaCourte News. Needs no introduction out here. Ken, Mike Bloomberg made comments heard around the world this morning. I guess he made them 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not sure that this would hurt him at all in the general election. I think more people agree with his comments than they would ever admit in the general. But how much does it actually hurt him, in your opinion, in a primary?
So, this is one of those instances where Republicans want to jump on him and start pounding him down into the pavement for things that are, to my looking, the things he said were reflective of reality and not racist. That said, 20 to 25% of the Democratic vote to get your delegates and win the nomination for the Democratic Party comes from African Americans. And, a lot of times they look at people and say, I'm looking for code words. I'm looking to see if a bad mask is slipping off of somebody. So I actually do think that for some black voters, they're going to look at that and say, that's what he thinks of us. He thinks we're all criminals. So it's a little bit of a problem. But I think you're right. In a general election, a lot of people are going to be like, those are the numbers. Sorry.
Do you think some of that is also kind of baked in the cake because he's Mike Bloomberg? I think people out there in the same way, this went for Trump too. I think people assume an old New York billionaire from a different generation, just the way he talks, the words he uses, that he probably has some audio out there. He probably has some thoughts like that. You can argue Joe Biden, the way he talks about race is not exactly the most modern progressive thing in the world. And I think a lot of people just laugh it off because they're like, it's my grandpa.
Right. No, I think you're 100% right. Look, Bloomberg hasn't gotten his time in the sun yet. He's going to. Whoever wins tonight, it's going to still be a little, let's assume that Biden doesn't have a good night, but that Biden does okay down in South Carolina. By the time you come up to Super Tuesday, what is it, 200, 300 million so far that Bloomberg is spending on his campaign. He's going to get a moment where Democrats take a serious look at him and say, is this the Trump slayer? And he'll go up in the polls. The press will all be talking and saying great things about him. And then we'll see. That's going to be his moment. It hasn't yet come. He can't win on 30-second ads. People are going to take a strong look at him and figure that out yet.
I need you to explain why he's going to get a moment. I don't disagree with you. I just want to know what you're thinking on why at some point in time the national spotlight's going for Bloomberg.
Well, part of it is this almost always happened. If you look at last year's presidential campaign and the primary with Trump was always kind of floating around here, and people had some discomfort for him. He was coming out saying things that they'd never heard, and you saw for a little bit of time everybody kind of got their moment in the sun. Oh, there is a senator from Texas, and then he looks a little too much like a used car salesman and would go down. You saw that a lot in this race. Elizabeth Warren was up and did very well at one point and was leading. There was a point where Kamala Harris was up and not necessarily leading, but doing pretty well. I think that even more now, Democrats are thinking they're screwing this thing up. They're like, holy heck, I'm looking at these people. I've got a 78-year-old socialist with a heart condition. I've got a gal who was running around pretending like she was a Native American for years. I got Pete Buttigieg, maybe. He looks like he's 14. They're very, very nervous that Donald Trump's going to get reelected. So I think that they'll give a serious look to any serious candidate, and one that says, oh, hey, by the way, babe, I've got $1 billion to spend on you. That's pretty attractive, even if he does look and sound a little bit like Elmer Fudd to a lot of people.
That is pretty attractive. Explain the appeal of Pete Buttigieg. I have to be honest, I never saw that Iowa thing coming. I like to think I know at least a little bit something about politics. I did not see him, of all people, winning Iowa at all. Where did that come from? Where is his appeal?
You know, I think his biggest appeal is that he is temperamentally moderate, if I can say that. I mean, look, you got Bernie, who's coming off like you just wound him up and he's cranky and screaming at things. You got Elizabeth Warren. Could you imagine having a beer with Elizabeth Warren? Oh my goodness, she'd be yelling at you and telling you that jacket is part of the patriarchy. You know, you look at a lot of the others and they're just they are so wound up and there's so much to prove. I'm the tough one who can beat Trump. I mean, Joe Biden's probably one of the more likable characters out there. Look, even when he called a gal a horse face, dog, pony, he said it with a smile. Even she laughed at that point. I mean, the guy's kind of he is temperamentally good. But I think you look at a Pete Buttigieg and, he's not screaming. He's not angry. He seems like a relatively cool guy. But he's also looks very young. How the gay thing affects him in certain parts of the world and in certain constituencies, both in the Democratic Party and Republican Party, I think is mixed and probably negative for him overall, but not as much as it would have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago by a long shot. But that's what I think he's got going for him.
Is Joe Biden finished? I mean, we got word this morning he and his wife already pulled out of New Hampshire, which is a very rare thing. They flat out left before the results are in tonight. They went down to South Carolina. Let's assume he takes a beating tonight. Everyone's anticipating that. But let's give him a win in South Carolina, which I'm not so sure about anymore, but let's give him that. Is he still done, or does that give him life?
I think he's got a chance when this. So if I was him right now, I'd be having my surrogates out there saying, we're going to come in 6th place in Iowa. That's what, in New Hampshire. That's what our polling is showing, that we're going to get wiped out completely. Well, because then if he gets 4th place or 3rd place, then you say, oh, hey, he did a lot better than he thought he would. I mean, so right now, if I was his campaign, I'd be spinning that down as worse as possible and finding some excuse for it. Secondly, then they're going to go into some states, and then. Look, the good news for him is that Iowa was so screwed up. There was no bounce for anybody out of that. I don't think that these two states are going to have the same kind of effect that they've had in prior years. Sometimes that's overblown, but I think that it's going to come out of here muddled. If he can go win a couple southern states and hold on, then he might be able to rebuild this thing. Look, he's still in the lead or very close to the lead. The RCP average today was actually the first one that showed Bernie Sanders ahead nationally. But I mean, look, he's still either in the lead or very close to the lead nationally. So he's still got some life in him yet, I think.
Explain to me why Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang never really caught on. I mean, they always seemed appealing to me. Yang has that kind of cool guy. You want to talk about somebody you want to have a beer with. He seems all right. Obviously, I don't like his policies. Tulsi Gabbard has the military background, comes across very measured. Obviously, it doesn't hurt to be smoking hot like that. And neither of them got any traction, and they're getting crushed in the primaries. I'm shocked there was never even, you talk about everybody having a moment. They never had a moment.
You know, that's actually a very fair point and a good point. Look, there were 20 people. There were 20 people in this campaign. I mean, I don't think I'd recognize Deval Patrick if he walked into my room. I mean, there's some of them that dropped out before I even knew what they looked like. Like I think Steve Bullock would have been a strong contender for Trump. He was the governor of Montana, and there's a Democrat in a very Republican state, work with Republicans. It's like, that's the kind of guy that could actually get some crossover appeal, as opposed to all the ones that are, right now it's the very well-known people like the former vice president and the lefties that are just pounding Trump as hard as they can just because he drives them crazy and they have to show that they're tough. Yang, he was a young phenomenon. I think if you were a computer person, I think if you were under 30, you probably liked a lot of things he said. Look, I would like him. I think he is actually, Now, I don't agree with his primary contention that computers are going to somehow make 30% of America unemployed. I just don't see that happening. And that was kind of what his campaign was built on. And Tulsi was just too conservative for him. She was unwilling to, every chance she could get, beat the heck out of the president, call him a racist, call him a this. She actually kind of sometimes flipped and was reasonable 20% of the time. And that was enough for Democrats, enough of them to say, she's one of them. She's not one of us. I think she would have also been a tougher person for the president to beat.
Ken LaCourte with LaCourte News, highly recommended. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Great being here. Thanks.
We got a lot more show for you and a lot more me. Hang on. Mike Bloomberg. I have a feeling you're going to hear me talk a lot more about him in the future because, look, the guy is not going away. Well, I hope he's not going away. He might after this, after I show you these videos that just came out. But look, he's really not going away. They just had a new poll come out. He's third in the national polls. He's climbing in New Hampshire. He's climbing everywhere. You see he's buying ads all over the place. And the guy has made of money. When you have that much money, it matters a lot. People can say, oh, you can't buy elections. That may be true somewhat, but let me tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it sure don't hurt. You can't win an election without it. The guy has so much money, he's paying people $150 a piece to put positive things about him online. Remember that alternate reality I told you about at the opening of the show? Mike Bloomberg understands there's an alternate reality out there, and he intends to buy one for himself. But look, Mike Bloomberg has a complicated past. When I say complicated, I mean he's a Republican, and then he was an independent, and he was mayor of New York, and now he's a Democrat. He has all these things. He's been across the country politicking for quite a while, buying races for Democrats, wiping out coal towns. He has a lot of history, and when you have a lot of history, a lot of things on your resume, eventually you're going to have things on there that you don't necessarily want to come out when you're running for president. Things like saying white people get stopped too much by the cops.
They just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
Now, you can agree or disagree with what Mike Bloomberg just said. Believe me, I'm not going to take a poll and find out. I suspect that video and the one I'm about to play you, I suspect more people actually agree with him than would ever admit. You remember my gladiator theory? Oh, you don't? Well, I'm about to tell you again because it's so brilliant that I think, the ancient Roman gladiatorial games where they were killing each other and killing prisoners and fighting animals and ripping each other's guts out. And it was the most violent thing you've ever seen. And they packed the place. And we were to bring back a gladiator event today in the United States of America. One big event in a big football stadium. And they would go around and you would see, how many newscasts would you see about it? How many think pieces would you see about it? How much outrage? How many protests? They can't do this. This is America. And they'd stick a camera and a microphone in everybody's face, and every single person to a man would say they're disgusted by it and they can't believe this is going on and it shouldn't happen. And the pay-per-view numbers would shatter every single record. Every single record. Because we live in a shamed society where, for various reasons, people don't feel comfortable saying what they believe. It's such a cancel culture out there now. You have to worry about stepping out of line. Someone's going to call your employer. I suspect a lot of people heard Mike Bloomberg say those words today and thought, yeah, that's probably true. Not saying they're right, I'm not saying they're wrong, but a lot of people heard him say those words and agreed. The problem for Mike Bloomberg is this. He's not running in a general election. I think in a general election, those words actually wouldn't hurt him at all. He is running in a primary, and the truth of the matter is, in a Democrat primary, you have to win black people, or at least enough of a percentage of the black vote in order to win that Democrat primary. You can complain all day long about breaking people down like that, but it's the truth. It's been Joe Biden's entire strategy of the campaign. He knew he was going to lose in Iowa, at least he thought he did. He knows he's going to get crushed in New Hampshire, that's why he left. He's going to South Carolina, where he's expected to do very well because of the black vote. How does Mike Bloomberg get out of a primary when he's saying things like this about black people?
People say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana. They're all minorities. Yes, That's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
Obviously, as you can imagine, those words that were very difficult to hear, so there were subtitles on there. I'm going to learn how to read soon, too. But that's getting a lot of play today. I don't think it's going to hurt him overall that much. I do worry, like I just said, though, about what it does to him in the primary. The guy is a Democrat, ladies and gentlemen. And look, life is good if you're a Democrat in this country. Even Democrats will tell you that, especially offline when you tell them they know. They know they have the whole press in their pocket. They know the media is going to cover all their scandals and all their foibles for just a minimal amount of time, and they're going to move on. Whereas a Republican can do anything small, and the media will tear them limb from limb. But it'll be interesting going forward what this Democrat primary looks like. Let's assume for a second, this is probably not a radical assumption, let's assume for a second Joe Biden's finished. Elizabeth Warren's finished. That makes this a Pete Buttigieg, Mike Bloomberg race? Bernie Sanders race? That's a three-way race, ladies and gentlemen. And anybody who tells you they're absolutely positive how that thing turns out, they're lying to you. But let me fast forward just a moment. We understand that there's a good chance Bernie Sanders wins this, right? The latest poll came out, or, there's 8 polls a day, but the poll I saw today that came out today had Bernie Sanders leading nationally. Democrats are freaking out about that, and rightfully so. I mean, here's James Carville talking about it.
I am scared to death. I really am. And I think people and I think I'm waiting. I hope these African-American voters in the South, I grew up in Nibbville Parish, Louisiana. I live in Orleans Parish, Louisiana. I know 10 times more African-Americans than most people I know. And they're looking for somebody that can come in and not just excite them, but talk about things that really matter to them in everyday life. They're not interested in socialism and the revolution and all that foolishness you hear. They're interested in somebody that's going to come to them and articulate a vision as to how they fit into this country and what's their relationship and what kinds of things that the schools that kids go to, the health care their parents receive, the wages they receive. That's what matters to people. And if we lose that, we're going to beat the British Labour Party. We're going to be out in some theoretical left-wing la-la land.
That's where the party is, James. And back to what I was saying, let's assume Bernie Sanders does win this primary, and there's a very good chance. And let's assume Donald Trump blows his doors off, which Donald Trump's probably going to beat at this point in time. If this economy stays fine, Donald Trump's going to beat any Democrat he faces. Where does that put the Democrat Party going forward from there? Ask yourself this, what do they do from there? The major problem, the major mistake the Democrats did after losing the last election was this. They didn't self-assess. You know, that thing we all hate to do, that thing when someone tells us to do it, we get mad and offended at them, but it's pretty much always the most beneficial thing in the world. Look at yourself in the mirror after a major setback, a major failure, and say, what did I do wrong? Well, we haven't had that. We've had 3-4 years now of the Democrat Media Alliance calling Trump voters Nazis and telling everybody they're stupid. That's not self-assessment. But eventually, when you hit rock bottom, and they will hit rock bottom, they're going to self-assess. The question is this. Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, loses his run for president. Do Democrats self-assess? Or do they look around and say to themselves, well, we just had a bad candidate. We nominated a crazy old man. And contrary to what Joe Biden says right here, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to take a lot to beat Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're going to see, though. This is a marathon, man. I don't think anybody's predicted much of anything about who's going to win nominations in the recent past very accurately.
James Carville and other Democrats recently have put a finer point on it, saying we cannot nominate Bernie Sanders or we'll lose. He said people are not going to vote for socialism. He says, do you agree with that if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, Democrats will lose?
I refuse to suggest any Democrat can lose. I think, we could run Mickey Mouse against this president and have a shot.
Wow.
That's the mistake Democrats have made. And I'll tell you what, if I'm being nice, and we all know what a nice, sweet person I am, Republicans made the same mistake. I made the same mistake. When we nominated Mitt Romney, you see, I assumed that everybody hated Barack Obama the way I hated Barack Obama. And that's just not the case, ladies and gentlemen. The economy had somewhat stabilized. It's hard to bounce a sitting president. It's impossible to bounce one with a good economy. That's just a fact. And Democrats, you heard them all cheering, and Mickey Mouse can beat him. because Democrats are making the same mistake that Republicans made. They think everybody hates Donald Trump the way they hate Donald Trump, and reality says different. All right, we're not done yet. We got Selena Zito. Hang on. Joining me now, one of my favorite people in the world, writer for the Washington Examiner and the New York Post and virtually every other publication in America, the great Selena Zito. Selena, Bloomberg's comments, everybody's heard Bloomberg's comments on stop and frisk and race, and I played it for everybody already on the show, so we don't have to rehash that. I have this theory, and you can tell me I'm crazy. I don't think it hurts him. I don't think it hurts him in the long run. It may give him a short-term effect. He's a Democrat. They won't dwell on it, especially once the primary's over, if he's successful. I think more people agree with his comments than will ever admit to agreeing with him, and I think his money will buy his way out of it. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. I actually think his positions on taxing sugary drinks like the Big Gulp are much more damaging to him with voters than those comments are. Yeah, for sure.
What kind of appeal does he have? I mean, you live, work, and worship in middle America and the Rust Belt. That's what you're famous for. You go after these swing voters. And we always talk about Trump and his appeal to them. Tonight, we're focusing on Democrats. What is Bloomberg's appeal, or does he have any appeal to those people in a realistic world?
It's really funny that I'm known for being famous from Pittsburgh. I love that notion. But so I went and covered Bloomberg last week in Philadelphia. He was at the other end of my state. He held a rally. And one of the most interesting things about the rally was three things. It was catered. Who knew that you could have a catered rally? There was an open bar. Also nothing I've ever seen in a rally in 3 decades. But he did understand the importance of coalition building, which is something that none of the current sort of contenders right now that are battling it out without him on the stage have shown any interest in forming. And what do I mean by that? He had a variety of different silos of voters that are needed to win an election at that rally. Now, was it by design? They're not talking. But there certainly were plenty of those suburban, white, female, former Republican, Philadelphia, Collier County voters at this rally. And I thought that was interesting, but I don't know. It shows to me he knows how to build a coalition, but all suburbs are created equal. So the suburbs in Western Pennsylvania, very different than the suburbs of Philadelphia. And the suburbs in Western Pennsylvania are very similar to the Midwest, in Kenosha and Macomb County and Howard County, Iowa. And I don't think he has the ability to win those suburban voters over. And he needs them if it's a general election and he wants to beat Trump.
I need you to describe for me the suburban white woman and why they are leaving, the college-educated suburban white women. I mean, poll after poll after poll shows that they are leaving the Republican Party. They're becoming Democrats. Now, obviously, they do something more than just sell essential oils on Facebook. Why are they leaving the Republican Party?
Well, all suburbs are not created equal. So if you look at the suburbs in Northern Virginia or in Philadelphia, those white suburban voting women broke for Hillary Clinton, and they also broke for Democrats in the 2018 midterms. But if you look at the suburbs in places that are outside a blue-collar town, like Western Pennsylvania, Erie, Ashtabula, Ohio, Macomb County, Detroit, those white suburban voting women are staying within the new Trump populist conservative coalition. Things like judges, things like the Second Amendment are and things like the tax cuts are very important to them. They've not only just helped their family, but also they have made their communities better. And that's the nuance that sort of people missed in 2016. They thought it was all about Trump. It wasn't. It was all about the communities that these people that have lived in and have not been paid attention to for at least 2 generations. You brought up the Second Amendment, or guns, for those of you who aren't constitutional scholars like me.
How much do, let's say, Democrats or at least swing voters, how much do they care about that issue? I've always been under the impression, especially if you look at the history of it, that is an election loser for Democrats. Any kind of gun grab is pretty much universally hated except for the far radical left wing. Am I nuts? Has the country shifted on that, or is that still a pretty solid thing that's going to hurt Mike Bloomberg?
It's definitely going to hurt Mike Bloomberg. And all you have to do is sort of take a look at the movement that began out of Virginia on the new laws that are proposed being passed by the Governor Northam and the new Democratic majority in the state. If you go down there and you talk to voters, it's not a left-right thing. You find across the board support for them not wanting the government to be this heavy-handed with how gun laws are created. And I think it's a problem with the left that they don't understand, because the problem is they don't give enough room for centrist voters to be part of their party. And they're missing that things like what's happening in Virginia, and it's spreading to other states. They're not calculating on that happening because they don't understand it. And it's a problem because it's not left-right, but it will impact in the ballot box in November of this year.
I owe my viewers an apology. I forgot to ask you something earlier. I meant to. What exactly did he cater at the event? What kind of food are we talking about here? Give it up.
Well, I didn't get close enough. It smelled like salmon. I'm sorry.
Ew.
You know, they really don't let the press, get that close to like the good stuff, where we get granola bars and bottles of water. We didn't get open bar and cater food.
I wouldn't let you dirty people near the food. Anyway, I do question the politics of a candidate who caters salmon at an event. That's absolutely disgusting. All right, Joe Biden.
I'm not positive, but it seemed like that was there.
Joe Biden's finished, isn't he? I mean, and announced today he and his wife have pulled out of New Hampshire. They're just already moving on to South Carolina. Is there any path to victory for him, assuming New Hampshire's a bloodbath like Iowa was? And let's say he goes to South Carolina and he nails it. Is he toast, or does that give him life?
Well, because this is so fluid, I'm not ready to sort of call anyone DOA because the thing that tells us the most about what's wrong with this current crop that's running is the lack of interest and turnout in the Iowa caucus, but also in the New Hampshire primary. From what I understand, though, that may change radically between now and 7 p.m. Turnout has been down. And so my larger point is, maybe anything does happen from South Carolina on. Joe Biden's problem has been, on paper, he was perfect, but in the delivery of what he was talking about to attract voters, he never talked about the future. People always want aspiration. They always want to know where you're going to take them, not where you've been and what you did before.
The great Selena Zito, author of The Great Revolt, and then writes for the Washington Examiner, New York Post, and everyone else. Selena, I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. We are not quite done yet. There's a bit of a tearjerker for you. Hang on. Everybody remembers those 2 Green Berets we just recently lost in Afghanistan, and it's terrible. Say a prayer for their families. Rest in peace to those great warriors. And I have always loved it when we bring our warriors back home. It's not always been done, by the way. There are grave sites across the world for guys who have died, especially during World War II. There will be, American sections of guys who have died, and I always hated that. I think if you go overseas and you fight for the United States of America and you give your life for the United States of America, that you have a right to be buried right here in the U.S. of A. And so they brought those 2 guys back, and President Trump and Vice President Pence showed up at Dover Air Force Base unannounced just to salute and pay their respects. And I will tell you, I think that moment's awesome. I think it's powerful. I think it surpasses all politics, Democrat, Republican, none of that stuff matters. I like when the commander-in-chief shows up and pays his respects to the men underneath his command who gave the ultimate sacrifice. So salute to those guys, salute to their families. Let's hope that gave them at least some small amount of comfort, although nothing ever can fill that void. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have some fun. see you then.